Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Cold Case Christmas. In this episode, we're going to investigate the mysterious deaths of John and Joyce Sheridan. John Sheridan was a senior partner of a law firm, but he was also a bit of a mover and shaker in political circles. And he was a very busy man. In his time, he'd been a transportation commissioner, he'd been on a hospital board, he'd been the chair of a non-profit organisation. He'd done a lot there in New Jersey over the years. John and Joyce had 4 sons, now grown, twins Mark and Matt, Dan and Jim. So what would make a gentleman in his 70s, having had a successful career, nice home, nice family, decide to stab his wife to death, setting the house on fire before fatally wounding himself? Just as dawn was about to break in Skillman, a wealthy area in Montgomery Township, Somerset County, New Jersey, just a few miles away from Princeton, smoke drifted into the atmosphere. This was September 28th, 2014. Local police and firefighters responded to a report of flames at the Sheridan's house on Meadow Run Drive. It was coming out of one area of the second floor that turned out to be the master bedroom. Firefighters entered through the front door, which was unlocked. They were able to put out the fire, which had been fueled by gasoline that had been poured on the floor. And there they found the bodies of John and Joyce lying face up. John was pronounced dead at the scene. Joyce, they thought they had a hope of saving. They took her to hospital, but unfortunately, she died as well. They found the gasoline can alongside matches and knives. They also found a heavy wooden implement that had been partially consumed by fire and that seemed to have fallen onto John, breaking several of his ribs. There were stab wounds on both bodies. Joyce had 12 stab wounds, mostly on her head and her hands, which appeared to be defensive wounds. Police photographer Barry Johnson described her appearance as mutilated. The stab wound, though, that proved fatal was one that pierced her aorta, the artery near the heart, and her death was deemed a homicide. John had been stabbed 5 times, mostly on his neck and torso, and one had pierced his jugular vein in his neck. Soot from the fire had been found in his lungs during the autopsy, along with elevated carbon monoxide levels, suggested that he'd been alive when the fire was started. Ultimately, this horrific situation had been deemed one of murder-suicide. John had stabbed Joyce to death. His wife for 47 years, a man of 72 years of age. He then set the room on fire before stabbing himself. Their sons, though, did not believe this and campaigned hard for their parents' deaths to be deemed what they believed them to be. Both cruel and horrific murder by someone who got into the house, stabbed them both, and then set the house on fire. But in May of 2022, their sons got their wish and the case was reopened. The New Jersey Attorney General's office, led by Matthew Platkin, has been very tight-lipped on what it was that actually caused them to reinvigorate this investigation. Stephen Barnes, a spokesman for the AG's office, said, "We will follow the evidence wherever it leads." Theories about this case had rumbled on over the years, basically fueled by their sons continuing to campaign to whoever had listened that their parents had not died in some bizarre murder-suicide. This was a double homicide. Mark Sheridan pointed out that the circumstances surrounding his parents' deaths were eerily similar to those of a separate federal investigation into the murder of a Jersey City political operative. This is Michael Gualtieri, who was murdered in a very similar way to the scene that John and Joyce were found in. He was stabbed and his apartment was set on fire. This was just 4 months before the Sheridans' deaths. Sean Caddell, a well-connected political consultant, had confessed to hiring 2 men to kill Mr. Gualtieri, who'd been a one-time friend of this Sean character. Prosecutors didn't disclose a motive in that case, but all 3, the 2 hitmen and Sean, have pled guilty in federal court. And here's the weird thing. Whatever weapon had been used to kill John and Joyce, it was not found at the scene. There were knives at the scene, but not one that appeared to match their wounds. Yet a knife similar to one that Mark Sheridan described as being missing from his parents' house was later discovered in a truck driven by one of these hitmen. And that's in court documents. However, prosecutors have not suggested in any form or fashion, in any legal documents or to the media, in court or anything, that any actual link exists between John and Joyce Sheridan's deaths and the murder of Mr. Gualtieri. But John and Joyce's house has been sold. There's no way that any evidence that failed to be collected at the time, that may have once existed, could ever be found now. And Mark in 2022 said, "I worry that 8 years have passed and it's going to be very hard from memories and physical evidence to get anything." But that doesn't mean we don't want them to try. Now, as far as I can tell, nothing more has come out about the investigation. So, at the moment, are we to conclude that the initial thoughts of the investigators will prove to be true, that this was a murder-suicide? Or is there something much deeper than this? And are the Sheridan sons right, that their parents were brutally stabbed to death in their own home? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I will see you soon in the next episode of Cold Case Christmas. Bye, guys.